Blog Talk Radio.
Join BluPrint Radio each Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. BluPrint Radio host Gloria Thornwell interviews organization leaders on trends and best practices in business and human capital management, business and human resource leadership, and being a change champion in the new global business economy. www.blogtalkradio.com/BluPrint LLC.
Hi, and welcome to BluPrint Radio. BluPrint Radio is a division of the BluPrint Leadership Institute, and on the BluPrint Radio show, we interview organization leaders and change management professionals who are subject matter experts in human capital management, business strategy, government contracting, and those who have reinvented and led organization transformation in the new global and changing economy. I'm Gloria Thornwell, Human Resource and Management Consultant and your BluPrint Radio show host. Workplace diversity as a topic is not new to the business world, but it is new as its definition is now much more broad-based. Many times when one thinks of diversity, the thought is of race and gender only. And while those are certainly components, diversity is much bigger than gender and race. We've invited special guest Linda Wilson, a diversity thought leader, to our show today to talk about workplace diversity. She'll talk to us about diversity, workplace diversity that is, in general, but she'll also talk with us about workplace diversity in the 21st century. Welcome, Linda, to BluPrint Radio. Even in today's global economy, diversity remains an area with which businesses and other organizations sometimes continue to struggle. Business leaders remain challenged in their energies to better understand diversity and the core concepts that are included in its definition, which in turn many times leads to difficulty when attempting to integrate diversity into business and organization strategy. However, 21st century organizations include diversity in their talent acquisition agendas, in their retention strategies, and ultimately diversity is included in bottom line projections. So for example, in order to win local, state, and federal government contracts, diversity is one of the key components to being selected as a contractor of choice. Diversity is more than affirmative action. It's the way that the world turns, if you will, and diversity helps organizations be more competitive in a global economy. We're going to go to a short commercial break, and when we return, Linda Wilson, diversity thought leader and our special guest, will talk with us about workplace diversity, and she'll share her perspective as a 21st century thought leader. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Did you know that when you take a BluPrint Leadership Institute course, you can earn credits towards your PHR, SPHR, and GPHR recertification? The BluPrint Leadership Institute is certified by the Human Resource Certification Institute and by the International Accreditation Organization. Earn CEUs in project management, finance, executive development, and in other disciplines that will keep you current as a 21st century business leader. Register today. www.blueprint-llc.com.
Welcome back to BluPrint Radio. I'm Gloria Thornwell, your BluPrint Radio show host. Our topic today is workplace diversity, a 21st century perspective, with diversity thought leader Linda Wilson. Linda, are you there, and can you hear me?
I'm here, and can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Great.
Linda, thank you so much for joining our show today. We want to welcome you again, and so I'm just going to dive right into the Q&A if you don't mind. So, Linda, many times, again, as I mentioned in my monologue, when one thinks of diversity, the thought is of race and gender only. But, as you know and I know, it's much broader than that. Can you share with our listening audience a more full definition of diversity, in particular in the 21st century?
Yes, and before I go on, I do want to say thank you for the invitation, Gloria. I truly appreciate it because it still is a very big topic these days, diversity. And, yes, race and gender, it's broader than that, but I do want to make sure folks know that race and gender are still some of the toughest conversations that people have in the workplace. They are important, but there's so much more involved these days. And since diversity is often paired with inclusion, I'll mention them both. Diversity in its purest terms, its Webster Dictionary definition, is variety, pure and simple. In work terms, it includes the ways we differ as individuals and members of groups. That includes personality, values, race, ethnicity, as we mentioned, gender as well, age and generations, faith, sexuality, family life, general experiences, your background, military experience, abilities, education, seniority, organizational role. Phew, the list is long, no doubt about it. And while some of these are obvious or visible, they can be misleading. For example, a CEO who rides a bike and comes in dusty for a meeting may be thought to be a messenger. And how many times are people assumed to be from one background because of a name? It's complicated. In fact, you could almost say, like, I think there's a quote that's, democracy is messy. Well, diversity is messy, too. It is big. It is life. Now, the intent of diversity is to get folks to slow down, notice their own and others' diversity, and respect and value differences because growth requires it. I really do want to impress upon people that self-awareness is so key to anything, particularly around leadership, and diversity is, that's step one. You really have to deal with, do you even know your own differences within yourself? Inclusion, however, is how the organization shows it does value the diversity. It's making sure that colleagues who need to know are given carbon copies or whatever kind of copies, electronic copies now. It's considering that staff are stakeholders as important as vendors or customers, board members, elected officials, whoever. It's listening to all levels of staff. It's also the belief by all of us that we do belong, that we can contribute our full set of skills, and that we work in a culture of openness and trust. And that sounds, all very nice platitudes, but in fact, we all know that trust takes time, but we really don't have the time in workplaces to wait decades to get to trust. We have to figure out ways to get to know each other quickly and feel included so that we can get the work done. Simply,
absolutely, Linda.
Mm-hmm. And it's just simply that diversity brings the mix into the organization. Inclusion ensures those in the mix are supported to be the best possible team.
Yeah, absolutely, Linda. I wanted to add in, I love that you brought in, you described, or you gave sort of a list of different items that include diversity. So it's not, as you mentioned, it's not just race and gender, but it's a whole bunch of stuff. It really is big, and it's a heavy topic. And so, as we mentioned, race and gender are certainly very key, and those are key because they're obvious. But when it comes to some of the other items that you mentioned, a lot of times those things are just things that we don't see it, so we don't think it's there. We don't think of it as diversity. So I loved your definition. So thank you for that. Let me segue into the next question, and that is, how does generational differences affect diversity?
Well, that is one that I notice when I do diversity training. It bubbles up fairly quickly as far as some tension and conflict. And in all industries are frankly concerned about knowledge leaving anyway because the baby boomers retiring, although we're not retiring as quickly as they thought. And then Gen Xers are a much smaller group and do prefer to have their own businesses. They like to be entrepreneurs, so they're not as willing to be employees. So technology and growing vacancies are catapulting younger people, in the millennials, so to speak, into authoritative positions unlike we've ever seen before. And sometimes that can be difficult for older people to accept. Now, also, when it comes to generational differences, many younger people have received diversity, or sometimes they call it multicultural training, in their colleges, even in some of their high schools. So they come with a different mindset toward it. They expect the conversation to be a little more out front. Now, one thing I do want to say that, generational differences is a whole workshop, But a major issue has to do with feedback. The traditionalists, that generation before baby boomers, when it came to feedback, it was believed that no news is good news and really didn't expect feedback. The boomers, they expect an annual review, but not every 5 minutes. And Gen Xers want to see a little bit more. How am I doing? Pretty much monthly. And they came along when employee opinion surveys anonymously were given. So they're used to giving feedback up and down the ladder. And then millennials are, how did I do just now? Let me tell you how I think you did. So feedback is just part of everything. Just notice Twitter and the whole reality show, voting and everything else. Feedback is a whole different breed of cat, so to speak, for these days. So those of us who really want to move with the 21st century have to deal with making some changes around technology as well as values when it comes to the various generations that are entering the workplace. Last point with that is that I believe most new recruits are much more multicultural than ever before as well, just because of the very different demographics we are experiencing.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, but the different generations in the workplace at the same time. So you have baby boomers, you have Gen X, and then you have the millennials, who are now entering the workforce. It's a whole different mix, and so, everyone has to learn, the differences between the generations and learn to adapt. And partner with the different generations, because the different generations have different sort of belief systems and value systems.
Mm-hmm. Experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Well, Linda, we live and work in a global economy, and so what are some of the diversity challenges that organizations, and I'm talking in particular here about the human resource professionals in the organizations, what are some of the challenges that they're most likely to face in terms of diversity, because it's a brand new global economy?
Before I answer that, let me read a quote by Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. I just think it really sets the tone, and I use it a lot. When we arise in the morning, we go into the bathroom where we reach for a sponge, which is provided for us by a Pacific Islander. We reach for soap that is created for us by a European. Then at the table we drink coffee, which is provided for us by a South American, or tea by a Chinese, or cocoa by a West African. Before we leave for our jobs, we are already beholden to more than half of the world. I love that quote, and it really does, to me, wake people up to just how much other people around the world contribute to our livelihoods, to our daily lives. The challenge I find, however, is people in America are often unaware of all that other countries do and contribute. We sometimes are dismissive of those who don't speak English, though we speak fewer languages than most people, even in poor countries. And then there's how we do business, direct and fast, without building that all-important relationship that other cultures demand. Now, there are resources everywhere. I mentioned one called Culturegrams, which are excellent, which give you insights to the various cultures around the world. There's State Department guidelines, and, of course, there's always training so that people understand the differences with space and time and various things. We really need to get smarter about that in order to work together. For HR professionals, though, there's the added immigration laws that are changing constantly, the need for international staff to find work for families. In other words, when you hire someone from another country, sometimes they want you to hire their spouse as well, or at least help them find one, because they don't know the system. And then there are the ones that I really can't stand, and that is complaints from clients and sometimes even staff about people with thick accents. It's so much, and we really have got to learn how to not be so dismissive about other people and to take a little time. I mean, we have to not be so American-centric, so to speak.
Thank you, Linda. We're going to go to a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our interview with Linda Wilson, workplace diversity thought leader, so please stay tuned.
Did you know that when you take a BluPrint Leadership Institute course, you can earn credits towards your PHR, SPHR, and GPHR recertification? The BluPrint Leadership Institute is certified by the Human Resource Certification Institute and by the International Accreditation Organization. Earn CEUs in project management, finance, executive development, and in other disciplines that will keep you current as a 21st century business leader. Register today. www.blueprint-llc.com.
Welcome back to BluPrint Radio. I'm Gloria Thornwell, your BluPrint Radio show host. Our topic today is Workplace Diversity, a 21st Century Perspective. We have with us on the line special guest Linda Wilson. She's a thought leader in workplace diversity. Linda, we have about 14 minutes left, and we have a lot to talk about in that time. So my next question is, when developing a diversity strategy, what dimensions, structures, and practices should the organization include?
Okay, Gloria, that's a pretty big question, so bear with my response. First of all, a diversity initiative or program or even strategy is by its very nature an oxymoron. It is a process. It is something that goes on forever. It's life. It's a paradigm shift. It's always been key to evolution or progress. It's a transformation of values and behaviors. And today, smart organizations are more conscious of its potential and are willing to acknowledge its challenges and are thus able to tap its creative opportunity. They have to understand that, because oftentimes they just want it to be a project that's managed, and it really is an overlay to the entire organization and the world, in fact. So what I'd like to do is give you a 6 stops or steps in a journey. It is a journey, and it's much more complicated, but I'll keep the headlines if you don't mind. Number 1, you have to create a diversity vision, and that's keeping the values of the organization in mind. And I mention this because I worked with one organization. We did it, and then that organization was acquired, and guess what? They had different values. So you really do have to be very clear on the vision and make sure that the values are in mind. Secondly, you have to build organizational awareness and commitment through a cultural audit. Now, that should include both the facts, get all your metrics, because that's your starting point, but you have to deal with perceptions. It doesn't matter what facts tell you if staff and customers and clients see something different. Number 3, strengthen top management commitment, and oh boy, that's more than a notion. It takes a lot of time, and I think I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But one thing that I bring up a lot when I'm on panels is don't forget those middle managers and thought leaders, because whether you like it or not, the rubber meets the road when the manager is managing. How that manager does a meeting, how they mentor, if they're fair and equitable, things they say, how they handle differences, and how they try to build unity. I really believe that as important as it is to get the top managers, the top leaders involved, those middle managers are the linchpin. They're the ones that prove and interpret what has been written down in policies. Number 4, once again, choose solutions that fit the culture, including rewards, and figure out when you need to do some enforcement. A lot of times we in the diversity industry are told, don't make it mandatory. Well, you know what? Sometimes you have to make it mandatory. And you need to be aware that there might be a little discomfort, but you and they will get over it. 5, got to reinforce things. One thing people are very used to, unfortunately, is leaders having a new trend, doing little stutter stops, having project or flavor of the month or whatever. You've got to make sure that it becomes a part of the entire organization, and that is institutionalizing the belief systems. And last, use building blocks. Start every time there's success or progress, make sure that it's known. Add diversity to diversity, and make sure that it's involved in the client service. The diversity folks are seated at the strategic planning tables. The staffing conversations are authentic. That education, I believe fully in making sure that diversity is is I don't want to use the word piggyback, but integrate it into whatever training is available if possible. And, of course, marketing. People seem to get marketing pretty well. Community outreach. What places do you do your community outreach? What clients do you reach out to? Are there some you're missing because you're going to the same places over and over again? So sorry that that's so long, but it is a process, and it has procedures, but in reality, it really has to be a change effort.
You're right on target, Linda, and it's okay that it was an excellent answer. I was taking notes as you were talking, and you mentioned commitment from the top, from the leaders of the organization. Tell us, because we know that that's a requirement for any change effort, in particular as it relates to diversity. Commitment from the top is critical. So how does one get the long-term commitment from the top of the organization?
Okay, one thing, I had to learn how to do that because I'm a pretty straightforward kind of person, and sometimes I didn't see enough traction. And so how can I make this, how can I bolster my influence, so to speak? So, first of all, each of us is diverse as an organization. We have conflicting pulls ourselves. For example, a parent with young children who's ambitious and wants a special assignment that requires a lot of travel may, be conflicted about whether they want to take that assignment. Well, every leader is diverse as well. Diversity consultants, we all know that champions are essential at the top, and even those who truly want to support you are bombarded with other change efforts as well as day-to-day tasks. I'm thinking about the knowledge captures and the talent management and all the things that all of us are trying to push. What I have found out is you have to discover a special core value of each leader you want as a champion, and you feed that value. For example, one might want a legacy. Well, if that's what they want, those are the terms that you talk about. That's how you get that person interested. Another might be impressed with certain types of community service. Make sure you connect with them. It's almost like it's a kaleidoscope. You are a kaleidoscope, and so are they. So you find your matching pieces of glass so that you can have the same lens about things. I remember one who liked to get a preview of the training so he could be a star in the session. At first I was a little, why do you need to sort of have a sneak peek? Well, guess what? I really needed that individual, and so I'd invite him and we'd talk about it, and he loved being able to say that he understood quickly. He needed to think a little longer. Whatever it is that floats their boat, so to speak, give that to them offline as well as in meetings. You've got to build those relationships where you become a coach, so to speak, a counselor, so that they feel that they are really doing a good job at this. The last thing that I'd say.
I love. Mm-hmm.
Oh, the only other thing that I thought about is one thing I learned is that I sort of snuck up on some folks by accident and realized that there was a whole lot of pre-meeting going on. And so I decided to start doing pre-meetings too. So you have your ducks in a row when you go into the meeting about diversity. They've got it about other things. So I said, and goodness, did things move so much more smoothly when I realized that pre-meeting was a lot smarter than grouching after the meeting. Well, I hope that helps.
One of the things
those are tips.
Those are excellent tips. And one of the things that I love that you mentioned is really getting the leaders to buy in to whatever the item is that you're trying to execute. I love that, and one of the ways to do that is to invite them to be a part of the process. So I think that's just smart. We're going to take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up on today's topic, workplace diversity, a 21st century perspective. Be right back.
Did you know that when you take a BluPrint Leadership Institute course, you can earn credits towards your PHR, SPHR, and GPHR recertification? The BluPrint Leadership Institute is certified by the Human Resource Certification Institute and by the International Accreditation Organization. Earn CEUs in project management, finance, executive development, and in other disciplines that will keep you current as a 21st century business leader. Register today. www.bluprint.org. www.blueprint-llc.com.
Welcome back to BluPrint Radio. Our discussion topic today is workplace diversity, a 21st century perspective. I'm Gloria Thornwell, your BluPrint Radio show host, and our expert today is Linda Wilson, thought leader, workplace diversity. Linda, we have about 5 minutes left, and this has been such an enlightening and engaging discussion, interview, conversation. I wish we had a whole hour. My final question is, how can workplace diversity impact the organization's bottom line?
Okay. First of all, that's the business case conversation that is brought up, I'd even say sometimes ad nauseum. Sometimes I believe when people keep asking for, how does it affect my bottom line, I believe that might be some resistance. Because marketers and recruiters know very well how important a wider pool of customers and candidates are. Even think about music. People make the biggest money when they do crossover. So I think people know in their heart and their minds that it makes sense that diversity does affect you positively as far as the bottom line. But I'm not sure people are really aware of how important it is in over time. Let me give you an example. You remember the O.J. Simpson trial? 1994.
Yep, sure.
Well, maybe you don't, Miss younger person than I am. But
I fully remember.
Experts previously, I worked with the media, were basically white and male. When folks came on TV, or the radio, that's who they generally were. And that's because decision makers usually went to their narrow Rolodex. They went to a neighbor who was a professor at a college or whatever. But all of a sudden, when the O.J. Simpson trial came, women and people of color were sought out as experts. And they realized that, there's a lot of information out there we hadn't really learned about, and it just took off. Now, I'm sure you know, commercials and doctor shows and news shows abound with variety. The film industry still has a ways to go, I've been told. But deep down, people do know that the organization will benefit from a wider pool, just pure and simple. On a more traditional note, when we go and we try to sell these things, basically it cuts down exits. If people are happy, or I don't want to say happy necessarily, but a contented employee is always more productive and one who would stay a little bit longer. Top performers hear about organizations and they stay longer once they get there. People seek out organizations where the team really does collaborate, so there are less mistakes and do-overs, and bonuses are better. So for an individual, it's very clear. And for an organization, we all know how much it costs to even bring an employee onto an organization, particularly with the longer onboarding and, getting folks acclimated to the organization. They spend a whole lot more money now than they did before. So it's just pretty much common sense. Now, there are metrics. At the same time, I still do caution people that they don't get so caught up in that they don't realize that some of that is resistance.
Absolutely. Linda, we're going to have to close out, and I want to thank you again for joining BluPrint Radio. We've had a very, very enlightening discussion and conversation on workplace diversity and your perspective as a 21st century thought leader. Linda, you've been great. Thank you again. Linda Wilson, thought leader, workplace diversity. Again, we want to thank you so much for joining BluPrint Radio and for helping our listening audience more fully understand diversity and a 21st century approach. To learn more about BluPrint, visit us at www.blueprint-llc.com. Thank you for joining BluPrint Radio. We hope you will join us each Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until next time.
Join BluPrint Radio each Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. BluPrint Radio host Gloria Thornwell interviews organization leaders on trends and best practices in business and human capital management, business and human resource leadership, and being a change champion in the new global business economy. www.blogtalkradio.com/BluPrint LLC.